Welcome to the Donna Sebo Show Special Editions. This program is dedicated to featuring authors and experts from around the world who will share their knowledge and insight with you, the viewing and listening audience. Literacy and education are the keys to freedom, and diversity enables one to live in a world with broader perspectives. This is Donna Sebo, and I will be your host for the next hour. Welcome to the Donna Sebo Show Special Editions. I'm so delighted you're able to join us because with this programming, it is a complement to my daily radio programming, the Donna Sebo Show, as well as for Warriors for Peace. The guests that I feature on this program are authors. These are people that have taken the time to write down their stories, and sometimes those stories are even made up. And we have the privilege today of talking with a lovely woman that is in Florida, and we are going to be discussing a little bit of something unique. This is going to be about a man who has left a legend through his writing, and we have his wife, Ksenia Merck. And I want to say, Ksenia, I'm so delighted that you are with me. Bill's work, and you've got an image of his book, Ghost Flower, which is the latest production. But it is such a special story because he has left a legacy that is very, very significant and very, very special. Welcome to the show.
Oh, Donna, thank you so much for having me on this show, and thank you to your audience as well. It's just a privilege to be here with you.
When we have someone in the family who is passionate about what they do, and you have that experience of being William Merck's wife, and I know I'll call him Bill, because when I did the shows with him before, he always liked being called Bill. But when you share a life with someone who has such a dynamic background, he served in the military as an officer. He also was a university vice president for a number of years. He was engaged in so many activities with his community. And he, as I said right in the beginning, he's left a legacy because he actually wrote 3 books. Now, 2 of them are nonfiction. The latest one is fiction. So what I'd like to do is talk about the first 2. And the very first one was called Breadcrumbs. And it has an adorable image of him as a little boy standing next to a buddy of his. And it's something that conveys an image of a time and a space in his life where it was so significant. Being his wife, you shared so many of those memories and those stories. What made him decide to write Breadcrumbs? That was his very first book.
Well, Donna, Bill is a wonderful storyteller. And to listen to him tell stories is just a treat because he takes you to that place with the way he tells the story and the details that he describes. So in Breadcrumbs, I believe there are about 100 stories, a great many of them from his childhood with his grandparents and his parents. And again, his parents, his father served in the military, his grandfather served in the military. So his upbringing was from that, what we call that greatest generation, and had a profound impact on him. And so the stories are so important to hear about what it was like growing up in South Georgia in the 1940s and 50s. So that's the basis of how the book begins. But the Finding the Philosophy for Life is really about many things shaped Bill as he was growing up, but he dug deep to find his own path. And I think the purpose of this book, the Breadcrumbs book, is for the reader to find their path and their purpose. So he's just such an inspiration, but the 100 stories are just fantastic. Of course, I'm biased.
Oh, it's okay. You can be biased.
Well, he is my twin flame. He is I am tied to this man forever. And I think, Don, I didn't know it was possible, but I think I love him more now.
Hmm.
I didn't even know it was possible, but I think I love him more now.
Yes. One of the things I want my audience to know is that Bill passed away in 2024, and there was an intensive set of circumstances relative to this. So, with this very first book of his, Breadcrumbs, one of my favorite aspects was the story about his grandmother and his grandfather that he related. And the men in the family really stood up for their women. They stood up for the women very, very strongly. And before they even got married, Grandma and Grandpa, Grandma showed that she had a lot of spunk. I mean, she was being pursued by some men, and she ended up pulling out, I don't remember the type of gun she had, but it fell apart in her hands. I mean, that is quite a story. How she was never, ever bothered again. Ever. It was never, ever bothered again. And it's just so delightful to read those stories. And then, of course, Grandpa had to stand up to a bunch of you might say, mean, um, just not a nice group of guys. And the gun came into positioning again in that story. But he knew how to use one, but he scared the living daylights out of those that tried to create a very negative situation because they didn't want Grandpa courting Grandma. Well, they ended up getting together anyway. But it's stories like this that make you aware that there is so much that goes into making the character of someone. And Bill's stories of putting pennies on railroad tracks. I mean, that was, thank you very much. That's a boy thing, really. But I know that kids did that. I've heard the story before. When you first read the book, when he was writing that, and I believe that was done in 2022, when he wrote that book and you were reading it, what did that make you feel? Did you get an insight into parts of him that you didn't even realize he had experienced?
Well, the interesting thing about Bill for me was that we were married for 26 years, and I had heard so many of the stories along the way. But Donna, this man continued to tell me stories, all through the 26 years. I would look at him and say, "Oh my gosh, I'd never heard that before." So he had so many stories that he had shared with me along the way, and certainly we talked every night while he was writing the book about what he was writing. But then to read the collection is a different takeaway, and it just speaks to me of the depth of his person. And it also shows how much he was putting into the book for the reader to inspire people. And actually, all three of his books do that. They
Mm-hmm.
inspire the reader. So that's the takeaway for me. But I will tell you that Bill's philosophy of life had evolved while he was writing the book, and it continued to evolve all the way through, especially through our hospital stay.
Mm-hmm.
So very, very profound.
Now, I'd like to bring that up because Bill went through a pretty difficult time at the end of his life. What happened? Because this was a very unique situation for him.
Well, um, Bill was diagnosed with prostate cancer in the fall of 23, and we went on a trip to Arizona over Christmas time, and we came back. It was the beginning of January, and he wasn't feeling good. And I I ended up taking him, and this the strange thing about this, Donna, was that this is a person that when he felt sick, he would take a nap and get up and he was ready to go again. I mean, he just was not the kind, he was just never sick. And so for us to experience then, okay, January of last year, he was not feeling well. He started getting woozy. He had gone to the doctor. They said, drink this, do this, do this. By Friday night on January 12th, I said, Bill, we've got to make a call here. And we ended up going to the emergency, and I drove him there. He said, "You're going to need to get a chair." I did. His blood pressure was so low. They started working on him immediately. They said, "Okay, well this sounds like symptoms of the flu that's going around." And we said, "No, we think it's a reaction to the cancer meds that he's on." We ended up being in the getting from emergency to a room, and then that Sunday night we went into ICU, and that's when our world changed. And we were there for 2 weeks. We got moved to another floor. We were in the hospital for 2.5 months. And before this, Bill, I think he was really of the opinion that, if your spouse is in the hospital, you need to go home and rest so you can be there for that person. I said to him, Bill, because this was so off the charts, uh, dramatic and significant, I said, Bill, I cannot leave. And he said, I agree. So I stayed there every night with him for 2.5 months. And it was, I just I could not leave him. And his situation, seemed to get better. And then it would take a turn for the not so good, and we kept going down that path. And finally, after 2.5 months, there were some significant things at the end, and I kept pushing to say, Bill, you've got to get better so we can write a book together and help people. And but I think it was his time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's an experience. I know I've seen and I've been around conditions like that. I know what it's like. With Bill, though, before writing Ghost Flower, which was the latest book, and the two of you actually discussed quite a bit of that in his last period, but the second book was, well, just a very, very special book. And I remember when I got it and I was reading it, and I thought, this is really significant because so many young people today have no idea. They may think that they want to be a leader, but they have no idea what it takes to be a leader. And unlike Breadcrumbs, this was an entirely different way that he expressed himself. And there was a depth in what he gave in So You Want to Be a Leader. And it impressed me so much. And that was my first interview with him, by the way. That was my very first interview
Mm-hmm.
with him. And then
Mm-hmm.
after that came Breadcrumbs. And of course, then I had the opportunity to meet Ghost Flower. But this one on So You Want to Be a Leader is so significant. I think it could be given to everyone, every kid that's in high school. Maybe they decide they want to become the president of the United States. It seems like every generation comes up with that statement as they're graduating
Yes.
from high school. They want to be the president of the United States. But I really think that all of us are leaders in different ways. And that is something that he brought out. When he was writing that, of course, there was such a strong association with the military. What was that like for you when you were reading it with him?
Well, and again, Bill talked about the different aspects and chapters that he was writing. We talked every night about what he was writing and putting into his book. But the So You Want to Be a Leader book, I think, can, as you say, be for someone who is starting in high school, be for someone in college, be for someone who is starting their career, or it can be a tune-up for
Mm-hmm.
people who are already well into their career, because there are lessons learned there that can always help someone. And again, that was his purpose, to help people, to inspire people so that they could do better. So that is to me the recurring theme through all of his writing that is so significant. But he also shows in his leadership book, talks about mentoring, helping other people. He talks about diversity, and when we he talks about diversity, it's about different cultures and different ways of thinking, different aspects that different team members bring in to better the team and to forward to have forward motion in problem solving. So uh, his book is excellent for anyone at any step of their career.
I would agree. And one of the aspects of the conversation that he has in the book with the reader is something that I think is really needing emphasis today, and that has to do with integrity, accountability, responsibility. And this, he said, and being in the military, that was something that was emphasized in a very, very special way. So when you're in the military, and he was in the Air Force, so you have that, you have the association with the different services, the Army, the Navy, the Marines, you have, your merchant Marines, you have the Coast Guard. There's always that emphasis that comes across. And I think in today's world, there's so much of a disappointment in so many of the leaders that are in the forefront that we're supposed to be able to have a respect and an appreciation for. And we find that it's not there. We just are very, very disappointed. So Bill's book, So You Want to Be a Leader, I think is very significant. I think it's significant in that it really puts an emphasis on how we can have a quality of life. That quality of life means that we have to have integrity with who we are and with what's going on around us. And that seems to be a big challenge. Did part of his wanting to write this was to emphasize that? Was he feeling that maybe in our era that we're having to rediscover what often the great generation is given credit for, that we need to know we have that legacy ourselves?
Absolutely. I think that uh, in many cases, the easy way is not the right way. And that's Bill. Bill would do things the right way. He had integrity. He stood by his decisions. If he made a decision, he stood by it and he stood up for it. He stood up for people and he didn't sway with the wind. And I think that there were many situations that we had encountered in the last few years before he wrote that book. And that just brought integrity to the forefront of how important it is. For Bill, integrity was not a new thing. It was the way he always was. And part of that came from, Donna, the Breadcrumbs book, being raised by the greatest generation, that World War II generation. Those people sacrificed and they had integrity and they stood for what was right. And that's the generation that he was raised by. An interesting thing is that although Bill was several years older than me, my parents both served in World War II also. And so we had that in common of being raised by the greatest generation and having that foundation of integrity. So for Bill, that was a constant. But you're absolutely right that we're not seeing that today. We're not seeing the consistency in leadership. When someone is a leader, we want them to be consistent, somebody that we can depend on, that we know is solid. And Bill was that person. He was that person. And you'll see those leadership qualities come through in all three of his books, but also you'll see it in Ghost Flower in a strong way.
Yes, now Ghost Flower. Now this is totally opposite totally opposite from the other two books. And I was absolutely fascinated. It's an amazing read. And for those of you that are sci-fi people, if you are interested in time travel, aliens, well, I think that this would really be quite a book, to read. And it is really almost for any generation. I mean, if you could be a kid in elementary school and find this so intriguing as I did. Now, with Ghost Flower, when did he start working on this? Now, So to Be a Leader came out in 2023. Ghost Flower, that is done after Bill passed away. Now, you said earlier that when you were in the hospital, you had a chance to talk with Bill, and you were discussing things about Ghost Flower and so many other things. This is a phenomenal legacy that he has left with all three of these books. But Ghost Flower, this is almost, to a degree, sort of prophetic in some of the material that he has in it. But it deals with past history. When he started this, did you ever at any time when he expressed his idea to you, or when he started sharing things with you, did you ever have the thought, gee, Bill, you've written 2 nonfiction books. Why are you writing this book? Why do you think he did it? He's done an incredible job with it.
Well, he has done an incredible job, but he always was interested in science fiction. He was always interested in um, where do we come from? Um, he would always look at the stars. He was always mesmerized by the stars and always interested in science fiction, and had said he wanted to write a science fiction book. And so I was not surprised that he wanted to do this project. And he went after it. He went after this ghost flower. I mean, he would wake up early and have that quiet time in the morning and just write, and throughout the day as well. But he really went after it. And what was interesting, Donna, was that we were in the hospital, and the doctors really did not have a conclusive answer for us about his condition and why it was the way it was. And so here we were in the hospital with this off the charts bad situation. The doctors could not tell us exactly what was going on. And then here Bill had written this book about a pandemic in the future and having to do time travel for a cure. That scenario right there for us was just another parallel. It was just uncanny how that was coming together during that time in the hospital. Uh, so, but was I surprised he would write a book like this? No, because again, his depth and his interest in so many things, it's just the perfect thing for him. And now it's the perfect thing for me.
Yes, it has totally changed your life. It's changed all of what you would have ever perhaps planned before. It's put you into a whole different dimension, if you will, of life happening. But now with Ghost Flower, we have in the very beginning of the book, there is that aspect where he introduces some primary characters, and they're from the Andromeda galaxy, if I remember correctly, from the planet Galen, and they're a lot like us. They're a lot like us. And so consequently, they come in, and they're in a time machine. And they're in a time machine from their environment. And so you start off with that and what their experiences are like when they get here. And it's quite challenging, but also something happens that's very, very interesting, and that is that their time machine, it dissolves. So he goes into all of this detail, And it makes me wonder, gee, was he ever in a NASA lab where he had a chance to watch all of the goings on, these scientists and various individuals of scientific background and skill, dealing with the space shuttles, et cetera. There's all of this fascinating intrigue right at the very beginning of the book. And the fact that these people, if we were to view them, it's sort of like a different version of Superman, where they come from, what is considered normal for them. For us, it's like a Marvel Comics special. You got all these superpowers, if you will, that they have to actually adapt because of where they end up, this planet. So it's really intriguing. But that's only just a smidgen of this story. Where did Ghost Flower come from? Because it is about a flower, a particular flower, ghost flower.
Well, where did it come from? He, I will say that Bill had a fantastic imagination, but I think that through history, we can look at herbalists and everything that they have done, and maybe that was one of the inspiring things for Bill with this flower. But the story of the flower in the book is incredible, and this is what the team is hunting for is this flower that has these fantastic properties that is curing people and keeping them free from these pandemic and other types of diseases.
When the story evolves, you have different time frames. In fact, I've got an extra book right here, and we start off right in the time frame of 2035, and that's 2035. That's a different way of saying it. But here you've got that time frame, Boston, Massachusetts, and it has to deal with what you just expressed, the pandemic. And just like we had such a challenge with the pandemic, COVID, in 2020, and it created such havoc. You look at what happened in 1918, the pandemic that occurred then. And to the best of my knowledge, they still don't have anything to cure that happened then, because it was so unique. It was a mutation of some kind. And that went around the world. So the parallel, here we go again, and scientists after COVID, they were even saying, my goodness, we have to be prepared because we could have another pandemic. So Bill picked up on that theme. But this involves something very unique and very, very special. But in Boston, we're dealing with a team that knows about a time machine project, and somehow or another, and you have to read the book to find out why, you have to go in and you have to figure out what is this ghost flower, because it doesn't exist in our current time frame. It isn't here in us now. So what are you going to do? You're going to go back. So there's all of this investigation and thoroughness that goes on with this small group of scientists that are willing to take a risk. And the risk is a real big one. And what is that risk?
Well, the risk is to do time travel to a different time period, a different generation, not knowing what the circumstances are, and not knowing if you're going to come back. That is hugely courageous and monumental for a team to embark on. It's just monumental, and that's the humanitarian aspect here of people helping, willing to do that and make that sacrifice for the people of the future. And that goes back, that ties into the humanitarian mission, and it ties into the integrity aspects and the leadership aspects that Bill has championed throughout all of his books. So it's just, to me, but for the courageousness of those people to time travel to help others um, is just incredible.
They go back, actually. They go back in time 450 years. That is beyond me. I mean, just imagining what it was like then, a world so completely opposite from what we have today, just so completely opposite from it. So it's really
Hmm.
something to be able to go back and forth, and that's what he does in the book. He goes into the present time, and then he goes into the time 450 years ago. So there had to have been a lot of research that he did relative to that time frame. And then there's the old manuscripts that are discovered and all of the old buildings, the historical buildings that still exist today that they have to go back. 450 years ago, they didn't have GPS, so you had to figure out where you were going to go. I mean, and they didn't have automobiles or anything like this, so you have to step back. This is what makes his writing so incredible. You have to actually step back and put yourself into that environment, dealing with horses, bows and arrows. I mean, okay, going to a Renaissance fair in today's world is just lovely. It's just absolutely wonderful. But can you imagine the living circumstances? And he brings this out. This is the time of Shakespeare. There's so much that goes on and the lifestyle that today most of us would just absolutely have a hissy fit to have even consider dealing with it. We just don't want anything to do with it. So he's going back and forth between these time frames, and he's so comfortable with it. He's so very, very comfortable with it. That must have been a big challenge for him to keep everything straight.
Well, I think it came to him naturally. I think it came to him naturally. I believe that Bill and I are very old souls, and he has a philosophy that I'm now embracing of use everything. So I think he's tied it all together very well. But I think that he has such depth, and being an old soul, I think that this really came to him very naturally. I do.
Well, the ghost flower, they do end up finding, but they find a lot more than what they would even expect. What they find is that they have to figure out a way. Now, there's no internet, there's no phones, nothing at all. But those scientists that ended up in that space of time, 450 years in the past, they have to think about how they're going to problem solve, how they're going to be able to get the information that they have put in a place that someone in today's world would be able to find. I think I'd have nightmares over that. That just is really something incredible to be able to put yourself into that positioning of being able to say, all right, I have to be like a private detective. How are these scientists that have been left behind going to find out what they need to know about this phenomenal flower that can save people's lives? Because the lives of many, many people are really at risk. And this is something, again, we experienced with COVID. So to fold all of that in, I don't know. Would you be able to think like someone 450 years ago? I don't think so. Not me, anyway. What about you?
But I think like somebody 450 years ago, I'm not sure. But I will tell you that when Bill and I visited England, Stratford upon Avon, and you'll see the picture that's in the front of the book of he and I. That was on the Avon River. We rented the rowboat, the first rowboat of the season. We took it out, and Bill rowed this boat up and down the Avon River. There were swans, the the little edge walls were all of the either of timbers or stone. And I said to him, I mean, I felt like I was in a 16th century painting. And I said to him, I think I could live here. And, now as I think about it, I think I did live there with him. I do, because it just felt so natural. And these are the synchronicities that just to me in the book and come through in different points that really make it magical.
Well, I'll tell you what, I really appreciated the female character, the one that was so strong, and the strategy that she used that was from Galen, and that they had to tone down what they did because they were so far advanced in that time
Hmm.
frame of 450 years ago that they would have probably been considered gods or given some kind of title, or they probably would not have survived. They would have been attacked because people could not mentally, they weren't in a position. And that's something Bill brings out that I think is very significant. He brings out that you cannot force people to change their thinking, and that is a subtle undercurrent that is in his writing. And that was something that's often in the conversation of these people from another planet. We cannot show what we're capable of doing because if we do, they're either going to be terrified by what we're capable of doing and they'll be destructive, or something is not going to be in harmony and in balance. And isn't that the truth? We all have to grow in our thinking and in our belief systems and in our understandings. And it's not a one size fits all. Look at where we are in our thinking as peoples today that our ancestors would have really had a challenge with because they wouldn't have known how to grip it and mentally and make it something that they could incorporate into their lives. So he is showing so many aspects of the human character that I think are so real, even today, even today.
Most definitely. And the other aspect uh, about some of the characters, and especially the female characters,
Mm-hmm.
I have to mention this because Bill championed um, all people, but he supported people, mentored people, and he promoted people. And so it's important to see in this book how the women held leadership roles as well as the men. And they worked side by side
Mm-hmm.
together on this mission. And I think that is so incredibly strong also, that everybody gets equal, that they're all in it together for this mission. And I think that's incredibly powerful.
He goes into, too, how records were made and were protected by the people in the monasteries. He folds in so much history along with what is happening. And when he's folding in the history, the monk, the one monk that he
Mhm.
emphasizes so strongly, but how dedicated those men were. And there were some women at the time that were very, very dedicated, but it really was, it was a time frame where there was such a separation of what I want to say, social environments, caste systems, and in some ways they still exist today in certain environments. But my goodness, there is so much of that that he folds in, and then they find what they need to find, and then the race is on because they only have so much time to be able to bring forth the information to those that are really waiting for some kind. They've got a timetable. Now imagine if you're in a time space that's totally foreign to you, you have to be aware of what you're going to do. And you're also meeting some people that are going to live to be 200 years old, or,
Mhm.
I mean, you have all of these intriguing facts and the involvements with the different personalities and the different challenges that they have. And then, of course, we have to get into the pirates at that time. You had your privateers and you
Yeah.
had your pirates. So, I mean, this is so engaging. You go from one spectrum of the modern world, and then you're in this time frame, and you've got all of this interaction that goes on. It's amazing. So, and of course, you got to have a love story tossed in there every once in a while, too. And so he does that
Yes, we
very,
have
very.
to have the love story. Yes, yes, we have to have the love story. And yes, that is a very important
Oh,
love story.
absolutely. Absolutely. It's got to be. It's got to be in there. You know, there is, when I was going through, the books, even before we were going to do the show, I thought, he has encompassed, he's left a legacy. And this is something that people need to know, that the written word is very, very powerful. It is extraordinarily powerful. And when you use something in a story fashion like he put together, and your subtitles are space, time, and destiny, there is so much to that. There is so much to it.
Hmm.
And it's so engrossing because, in my mind, I would say, how did you go? And I mentioned this earlier. How do you go from one spectrum of time into another where you just make it go right along? And then you also did some of the illustrations in the book. You did some of the
Yes.
illustrations and you designed the cover. You have this, what do I want to say, a creative empathy that evolved with this book, Ghost Flower, that's changed your life dramatically, hasn't it?
It it has definitely changed my life. Um, the plan all along was for me to paint the cover, and in the hospital, Bill actually sketched out what he wanted of the main elements, but there was so much commotion at our house after his passing, and then I had so much administrative work to do. I could not find that sketch, but I went through the first pass of answering the editor's comments, and wow, I came out of that with uh, my first meeting with the editor, and I was just charged up from what could have been um, and it was devastating for him to pass. There's no question about it, but
Mm-hmm.
to then have that change to an awakening for me about my purpose is just what's given me a chance, and I'm taking it because I want to help people, and I want to continue with what I believe, he was doing in this book, which was to help people uh, and really, I want to further his legacy as well. But certainly, I mean, not only just inspired me, Donna, but I believe that he has been with me every step of the way as I was painting each one. I'm looking at that spaceship in the cover right now,
Mm-hmm.
that's on the background, and I'm telling you, as I was painting that and the flower, the catamaran, the monk, the stars. I painted those stars. I did not know how we were going to use those stars, um, but we have, and we're going to continue to use them. And then the layout of the book, the cover. I know he was with me every step of the way, and I will tell you that it was a Monday night and I was so exhausted. I went to bed, but I know he woke me up to say, let's go out there and do another couple passes on this cover again. And do you know that because I had these as collage elements, and when I put that spaceship in the center, it was like that was it. It was done. We did it. We did that. It's a collaboration. We did it together. So then that continued. I started drawing the sketches for some of the chapter headings, and it progressed, and as I kept going, then I changed and evolved some of my style in the drawings, and the Shakespeare is one that Bill was so talented. He had so many strengths in leadership and finance and organizations, but very few people knew that he had an artistic side as well. And Donna, he could draw your portrait, and he could draw you in charcoal. Well, so there's an aspect in the book with Shakespeare, and so I said, okay, I'm going to need to draw a Shakespeare. Well, I'm an architect, so my forte has been more of the landscapes and drawing buildings. So I did the Shakespeare, and then I did him in pencil, but Bill would have done him in charcoal. So
Mm-hmm.
I did him in charcoal, and now the Shakespeare is in the book, but I believe Bill was there with me as I was drawing every bit of that Shakespeare, and as well as the other sketches too. And I really feel that that was such a special time because I was connecting with him. We were connected because that was the only thing that I was focusing on was the art. And that was so special to connect with Bill during that time. And so I'm inspired to do more artwork because that's my time when I'm connecting with Bill every day, but it's another chance to connect. So it's important to me, but he's inspired me greatly and continues to do so.
Now, I know that with Ghost Flower, there's going to be a lot of conversation about that, and you're going to be doing book tours and all of that kind of process that goes with publishing a book. But when I'm watching the I look at the covers and I look at what he's left, and you have already expressed to me that you want to do your own book. You want to be able to put something together. So here you are. You've got such a dynamic relationship, not just with the love of your life, but also with the fact that he, again, has left this legacy for you, and then you're going to add your legacy to what is his. So the partnership that both of you are experiencing, I think, is just absolutely incredible. And to have that partnership go on after his passing, this is just going to open up a world for you that is going to be so inspiring and just so, I don't know, it's as if you're rediscovering a part of yourself that maybe you didn't even know existed. And as a woman, I think that the partnership and the association you have, that's really quite a dramatic one. I think it's inspiring for anyone that maybe has lost a significant partner or person in their life, and they wonder, gee, should I write about what we've gone through? Is it violating someone's privacy? You have all these feelings. And I think that there comes a time when talking about who you are, what you've gone through, what the possibilities are, there is so much that can be gained. You never know who's going to pick up that book and who's going to say, you've changed my life because of what you shared. And sometimes we go through some pretty ugly situations as human beings. Sometimes we make some pretty lousy decisions. And yet there's a magic that occurs when you write about your experiences, when you don't run from them, but you write about them, and someone reads them, and it's transformational for that person when they are touching the book, when they've got it in their hands. And I'm just a big advocate. I like a yellow highlighter, and I have to tell you, you may not be happy with this, but I have marked up Bill's book. In fact, I have quite a few areas that are marked.
I think that's wonderful. I have too. I have too.
But I
I
do
have
this with all
too.
of the people that I've interviewed. And I know for myself, I've been doing interviews for over 24 years now. And each and every person, I feel, when they take the time to write their story, when they share a part of themselves, it is something to be respected. and to be appreciated. And that is what is so significant about our conversation, because the written word stands the test of time. I mean, look at Shakespeare, look at Hemingway, look at so many thousands, millions of people that have put their story down, and how in some of our libraries, I know I've got some in my library, books that were written in the 1800s that we are cherishing today by Jules Verne, H.G. Wells,
Yes.
all of these people, and it is so significant. It is so very, very significant. And I am, I think that it's so important for us to know that when something as sad as what happened with Bill's passing, he was relatively young, he wasn't that old, and so for him being gone, I look at what he was able to produce, and often one might think, gee whiz, is that all? It's a shame he couldn't have done more. But I'll tell you what, I think you have been given the mantle of his legacy, and you're going to carry it forward. What do you see yourself doing? What do you want to do relative to your own writing and your artwork?
Well, Donna, this experience truly, uh, as we are talking, has been an awakening. I I know that it's an interesting thing because many years ago, my brother asked me, and Bill, we were in the car together, and my brother said, "What is your purpose?" I think I was in my early 40s, and I was just in shock. I didn't know what to say. And I thought about that then years later, and I had come to that I have had many purposes, and they change at different points in my life, have changed at different points in my life. And so my purpose going forward, yes, I am going to, I've got a draft of a companion journal that goes with Ghost Flower, that complements Ghost Flower. It basically has the sketch, each sketch, and then what inspired me with inside information, if you will, that ties into the book, and then it ties also to relevant questions within the chapters. So it's meant to be a journal that complements Ghost Flower. So that is a publication that we're going to be launching soon, very soon, and then I will be writing a book myself about probably, I'm thinking about my experiences with Bill as my twin flame. And this is also part of the healing that is occurring. And don't I don't know that I'm totally healed, but he has helped me to heal by giving me and me taking on this purpose. And that is so, it's just amazing because I think that I know, just as I was saying to him in the hospital, I was encouraging him to get better so we could write a book together to help people because our situation was so devastating and so awful. And I want to do that. I want to write a book that will help people. And if it's telling my story about some of these hard things that we're turning them around and finding purpose and going forward. And I think that that's a part of learning. But if I can do that and also help people, then that's really what I want to do going forward, Donna.
Ksenia, what I would like to do is have you give your website, because people can go directly to your website and find out more about your work. What is that website?
It's William F. as in Francis Merck.com. WilliamFMerck.com.
And Merck is spelled M-E-R-C-K. And again,
Yes.
WilliamFMerck.com. And that information is also at the end of the program. So for those of you watching, the program will be available and you'll be able to check out the website. Also, we want to express our appreciation to the teams, both in Florida as well as here in the state of Washington, that enabled this programming possible. And before I say goodbye, I would like to invite you to check out the Donna Sebo Show and Warriors for Peace. And you can check that out on the internet because all programming is free, 24/7 available to you. Also, the audio of this interview will be up on my radio programming schedule as well. So if you wanted to listen to it again or if you want to view it again, that is going to be made available to you. Remember, who you are makes a difference. You're the master of your fate. You are the captain of your soul. No matter who you are, no matter what your status is in life, you make a difference. And sometimes it's worthwhile picking up that pen and putting it to paper or writing on a computer, because you never know how your story may affect the lives of others. Cassina Merck, I want to thank you so much for being my guest. This has been a delight. And I want to thank those of you that are watching the program. Be sure to share the information. TCTV will be broadcasting it as well. Thank you so much for being with me. Until next time, Donna Sebo here. Bye for now.
You have been listening to the Donna Sebo Show Special Editions. The audio version of this program will also be heard on the Donna Sebo Show radio broadcast. We are delighted you were able to join us and invite you to share this programming with your friends and family. Have a rich and fulfilling life.